Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's Aaron, and before we jump into our main segment, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to the organizers of All Things Open, the open source conference that just took place here in Raleigh. Great event, great speakers, and great conversations. I certainly recommend this show for anyone out there listening, and make sure you put it on your radar for next year as well. Now, let's move on to our interview. This week we have Keri Olson, VP of AI for Code at IBM. Keri talks about coding assistants across the software development lifecycle, the future of agents, and we dig into domain-specific assistants, and that is coming up right after this break.
Hey there. As a listener of the Cloudcast, you're probably also interested in data, especially about the ways in which it continues to shape our world. So you need to check out Data Citizens Dialogue, a forward-thinking show brought to you by the folks over at Calibra, the leader in data intelligence. You'll hear firsthand from industry titans, innovators, and executives from some of the world's largest companies as they dive into the hottest topics in data. You'll get insights to everything from popular staples such as AI governance and data sharing, down to more nuanced questions like how do we ensure data readability at a global scale? My favorite episode so far is called How Data-Driven Care Changed the Healthcare Game. My family is part of the sandwich generation, so we're caring for younger and older family at the same time, and the insights in this show were really, really valuable to me. While data may be shaping our world, Data Citizens Dialogue is shaping the conversation. Follow Data Citizens Dialogue on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Cloudcast. I'm your host, Brian Gracely, and today we are going to dive into a topic that has been just getting a ton of attention, and is one of those things that there's a lot of stuff in technology we talk about in the show. There's a lot of topics, a lot of different people we talk to, but so many of them are it's a technology that you need to learn about for a while, and then maybe you'll implement it. It's a technology that, requires 20 different integrations, 6 months of stuff to get going. This one is something that we're going to dive into that you're going to be able to get started with like right away, right? Jump in, start using it, see productivity right away. And it's why everybody is so excited about it. We're going to dive into developer assistance, coding assistance, and really excited to have Keri Olson, who is VP of AI and Code, or AI for Code at IBM. Keri, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Thanks, Brian. It's really great to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah. Before we dive into all the things that IBM and watsonx are doing, give us a little bit of your background. Some of the things that you worked on maybe prior to being in this space, the AI space specifically, and then maybe more importantly, what are you really focused on these days?
Oh, absolutely. So in a nutshell, I'm an IBMer. I've been working with IBM since I earned my degree in computer science 23 years ago. I started as a developer in WebSphere right out of college and really enjoyed my work as a developer. And I've had the opportunity over the last 23 years to really serve in a number of different technical and leadership roles at IBM. And the work that I've done has ranged from middleware software to high-performance computing to business analytics to cloud. And now, as you mentioned, I'm very focused on AI and specifically AI for Code. So I'm part of IBM's Data and AI organization, and I'm responsible for our AI for Code product strategy, and I head our product management team for the watsonx Code Assistant portfolio.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, no, it's anytime that we work on things that are, or we talk to folks who are focused around developer productivity, we love when they've got a background of like, I lived with this stuff, I built things with this stuff, I've seen the good and the bad, and so excited to dig into this today. Before we dig into any of the things that IBM's doing specifically, GenAI, obviously for the last 2 years now, since ChatGPT and maybe a little before that, has been the talk of the town. It's been kind of on everybody's mind. Code assistants have been one of the areas that have been the most obvious places that people, begin to use them, see value from them. Where do you, if you had to sort of lay out, 1 to 10 or in some scale, how mature or where are we in the sort of the maturity of these developer assistants, at this point in time in 2024?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's really important to understand that we believe that the developer is still at the center of all of the development activity. So you should really think of AI code assistants as an assistant, as the name says, or a pair programmer. So the developer is still really responsible for the development work. That being said, AI code assistants that are out there today, including IBM's AI code assistants, are very capable of taking care of a lot of things in the software development lifecycle. And if you think about the generative AI capabilities that are out there, code assistants are capable of generating code, completing code, explaining code. And then there are other things that are really exciting, like test case creation, creating test cases and documentation. Some of those things that developers really like the least, the code assistants are really good at doing those. I can tell you that in IBM, we have thousands of developers that are using our code assistant, and they're getting a lot of value across many of those different use cases. And there's one example where we had a team that recently acquired or inherited a large project written in JavaScript. And the team that inherited it, none of them had experience with that project, the code that was written. And so the first thing they set out to do is really understand the code itself. And unfortunately, the code wasn't very well documented. In a lot of cases, it wasn't documented at all. Again, that's not a surprise. You see that a lot in software development, right? And so the first thing they set out to do is understand it and go ahead and document it for themselves and for the future. When they started doing that manually, they found that it took them about 3 minutes per file. Now, they had about 750 files, right? So 3 minutes per file, it sounds actually pretty fast, but when you take that times 750, you're like, there's got to be something I can do to increase productivity here and to be more efficient in the work that I'm doing. And so they decided to try the code assistant, and what went from an average of 3 minutes per file went down to 12 seconds to understand and document a file of JavaScript. And so that's a savings of about 90%. And that's just one task. The team is now setting out to do a lot of other things with the code assistant, but I thought it was a really great example of how you can really increase productivity and gain efficiency by using a code assistant.
Yeah. No, and I think it's an interesting thing to point out, because right now a lot of times you'll see a demonstration and it's show me how to write some code, how to add some things. But I think the reality is, if as you mentioned, if you talk to most developers, they'll also tell you, look, I only get to code about 30% of the time, 40% of the time. I'm doing documentation. I'm having to dig into old stuff. I'm troubleshooting. I'm fixing broken pipelines. So I think it's important to be highlighting not only where you assist them in writing code, but also kind of the rest of the entire life cycle, which is so much of not only what they do, but then, the other reality that so many businesses face is, their development teams are in flux. People come, they go, some of it's in homegrown, some of it's, outsourced, some of it's people come and go. So I think that thinking about the entire life cycle is super important, because you never know who wrote the code. You never know who documented it well, how you troubleshoot it. Are you trying to translate it? So much of that is really, really important.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
I do want to sort of talk about that whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I completely agree with you. And while code assistants are relatively new and this market is evolving very, very quickly, we are finding a lot of value in using code assistants. And given how new they are quite mature.
Yeah, no, that's great. I want to dive into this sort of kind of complete life cycle of software, because I think what I'm seeing, IBM has sort of a unique approach to that, or at least laying out a more complete approach to it. Do you find it's easier do you find as you're talking to companies that the first thing they think about is sort of developer augmentation productivity, or can you have the conversation in which you, like you said, you highlighted, documenting things, many companies are going down modernization journeys. So maybe they're trying to translate from an older code base to, do you find that when you lay out a broader story for them, a broader picture for them, they really start to highlight, look, we have a lot of different challenges in software development, not just the writing of the code, but the entire life cycle. Do you find that makes it a more interesting or kind of business-driven conversation?
Absolutely, I do. And most organizations that come to us, or most conversations that we have with different organizations, it does start with developer augmentation and developer productivity. But you're absolutely right that there are a number of things that coding assistants can do. And here at IBM, we have taken an approach of building purpose-built solutions for very specific use cases. So some of the use cases that we have found to be highly benefited by a coding assistant is IT automation. So you use IT automation to build out your cloud infrastructure, to build your infrastructure on-prem, to deploy applications, to build your security pipelines. So using Ansible and the Ansible automation platform, we have a number of clients that are doing that. And there are a lot of automation developers that are writing Ansible playbooks, and they might be focused on writing Ansible playbooks only like 10% of their time. And as things are changing and things continue to evolve, there is a skills challenge relative to Ansible and really any programming languages and development in general. And so we actually built a product that helps organizations to build Ansible playbooks, to write Ansible playbooks and explain them. And this is really helping with their IT automation and IT operations. We also do focus very much on application modernization because you're right. I mean, think about all of the applications out in the world today. Many of them were written decades ago. And specifically, our customers who are running on the mainframe or IBM Z, a lot of them have decades-old COBOL applications. And so we created a product to focus on application lifecycle and application modernization for the mainframe. And that really started with helping them to understand those COBOL applications and then helping them to modernize those COBOL applications if they chose to do so by transforming them from COBOL to Java. Now, there aren't a lot of COBOL programmers out there today. There are a lot more Java programmers. Right. So that really resonates with the business executives when you tell them that you can help them to modernize that application and then get access to a larger number of skills who can understand, build, and maintain those applications.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. And I think what we're starting to see emerge in the market is like you said, we're seeing more and more kind of built for purpose, specific tasks, specific industry, specific, vertical types of things. So it makes sense that you go after areas that there are, specific deficiencies. It could be in skill set, it could be in number of people. So that makes a ton of sense. I'm curious, one of the things that we're all kind of fascinated by is, we see demonstrations of generative AI, and interesting things pop out of that. Please build me this. But at the same time, there's a lot of us that are sort of thinking about, well, what are the downsides of this thing that seems sort of magic at times? And the reality is generative AI can't guarantee certain things, right? It's sort of a predictor of things. Have you started to see anybody have concerns about, using different services? So, obviously there are multiple services out in the marketplace today, to where customers are concerned that even if we're all using the same Java code base, or we're hoping that it will write tests for us, that companies are going to need to be concerned somewhat about, these developers in this organization or this group are kind of picky, so they picked their own tools, and we're using a different set of tools. Is there concern that the Java that comes out of that, is just an example, might be considerably different, or they'll spend more time having to troubleshoot each other's generated code and so forth?
Well, think about it, Brian. I mean, there are no two developers that is going to write the same code or solve the same problem in the exact same way all the time, right? Say you have two developers, you've got Jane and you've got Emily. You ask them to do a very simple task of sorting an array. Emily may take the approach of using a bubble sort, whereas Jane may take the approach of using a merge sort. They're both correct. There's nothing wrong with either one. Neither one of them are wrong, but they're different. And you're definitely going to find the same thing as you're using coding assistants. You could get a different approach to solving the same problem. Now, I do think that when developers are working together on a team, on a specific project, or on an application, it is really important for them to align on best practices and align on their procedures, right? So, my perspective on that is, you can absolutely use generative AI, but at the end of the day, you do want to make sure that those best practices are followed and the procedures of that organization are followed. So an individual team, whether that be a squad of people or multiple squads of people that are working on the same product, it probably is advisable for them to use the same code assistant. That being said, there are ways that you can also really manage the code assistant itself and to help it to give you exactly what you're looking for based on your best practices, based on your rules, etc. And one of the ways that we're helping organizations to do that is by providing smaller large language models for code that they can then go ahead and continue to train and fine-tune with their own data. So bringing your enterprise data and your best practices to the large language model itself really helps you to be able to make sure that you're getting what you want out of the code assistant. And I think that that provides a ton of value to organizations who are using code assistants. It's also really important for the underlying models that are used in code assistants to be transparent. So when you're using a code assistant, you really want to know what data was it trained on and what was the training procedure? How was it trained, right? You also want it to have AI guardrails and you want it to have IP protections. Those things are all very important as you're selecting a coding assistant. And again, I think if you're able to really refine that code assistant based on your own data, and you can do that certainly with fine tuning, you can do that with RAG, you can do that with context awareness in other ways. I think that's really helpful and helps you to get what you're looking for out of the code assistant and really builds the confidence of the developer as well as the leadership.
Yeah. So with that, that ability to kind of train it not only on your business's data, but is it starting to get to a point where it's learning the style of your business, the style of your developers? So like if you said, if maybe you've got 3 or 4 different groups that do things, and they've developers are like any other group. They tend to find norms, they find best practices. Are the Gen AI models starting to sort of learn those best practices as well as just the data, right? Sort of the context of how it was built, or kind of the reasoning behind how it was built?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of that, and I think context really comes into play here. So most of the code assistants out there, including watsonx Code Assistant, really takes context into play when it's providing recommendations, generating code, explanations, etc. So the context can come from that fine-tuning, but it also can come from using different methodologies like RAG and taking context of your environment into play. So the files that are in your environment, perhaps your code repo, perhaps the conversation that you're having. So most of these code assistants do have a chat interface, including watsonx Code Assistant, and all of the context of that chat comes into play with each request that you make to the underlying large language model into the code assistant. So that context is really important, and I think that really helps for the code assistant to, again, give you what you're looking for.
Yeah. You mentioned early on, kind of right at the top of the show as we were talking, you very much view code assistants as an assistant, right? So similar to a pair programmer, as you talk to companies, and like we've mentioned a couple of times, there's a lot of life cycle to things. It could be writing the code, but it could be translating, it could be writing tests, it could be executing tests. As you're talking to companies, like, how much would you expect things to be that sort of developer plus assistant kind of engagement? And then how much in the future do you expect that there will just be, whether it's through agents or some other sort of automated process, certain things will just take care of themselves, right? Whether it's writing tests or, merging pipelines. Like, what would you expect this to look like in a year, in a couple of years, or where are you seeing people say, hey, this is where we'd like to see this kind of evolve to?
Right. Brian, there's no doubt that agents are coming. Agents are definitely coming. We kind of went from the chatbot era to the assistant era, and now we're forging through to the agent era. And as I mentioned earlier, this market is moving so fast. It's evolving very, very quickly. And there are a lot of organizations that are looking to offload certain tasks to an agent. And confidence is really key here. You really have to be confident in that agent and its ability to work on your behalf in order to get there. So I really think that that's going to take some time. And I'm not going to go back on what I said of the developer is still at the center of this. I do think that over time, the role of a software developer is going to change immensely. If we sit down 5 years from now and have this conversation again, we will be talking about very different things. You and I probably don't even know what we'll be talking about in 5 years when it comes to software development. That being said, I do believe there will continue to be a very significant role for the software developer. The software developer continues to be at the center of this. I think that as we think about assistants and agents, it's really going to help us to be more productive, to be more efficient, to drive more software, to drive more business through the art of software development. And when it comes to agents, I will tell you, I just came back from IBM's second annual Tech Exchange conference out in Las Vegas. Flew back this morning, and just yesterday, a good friend of mine who happens to be an IBM fellow and the chief scientist of IBM Research, he actually gave a demonstration on stage of a SWE agent, a software engineering agent. And that agent was able to detect bugs or issues in code. It was able to automatically debug them. It was able then to automatically apply a fix and roll it out. This was all done autonomously, automatically, using the SWE agent. Now, this is something that's in our research team today. It's not something that we've productized. It's not something that's in our code assistant today. But I'm telling you that it can be done. And I think it's really important for us to think about the things that make the most sense to do as agents, the things that we can offload to agents and be confident in doing so. And there will be more of that in the future. But for today, I think the developer remains at the center of everything, remains using code assistance, and will remain in a role that's very important to the enterprise moving forward.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of curious the sentiment that you get, from talking to companies, talking to third party groups that are writing software. Like, do you get the sense that they're looking to say, look, let's find that low-hanging fruit, the stuff that's sort of undifferentiated heavy lifting, could be documentation, could be writing test suites, could be whatever. That's where they want to apply the more agentic stuff first to kind of build a level of confidence with it? Or are you seeing an unusual percentage of people that are like, let's shoot for the moon and try and fast track this? I would think it would be the former, but I'm curious if you're seeing a different sentiment out there as far as people, their level of confidence in it yet is what I'm curious about.
It's very much the former. A lot of organizations are really still experimenting with code assistance themselves, and they're starting to see the value of code assistance and applying it across the software development lifecycle. When it comes to agents, there's a lot of curiosity and there's a lot of interest, but they are looking for that low-hanging fruit and the things that maybe are not as mission critical to start testing it out on. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I'll tell you that most organizations I talk to, they tell me they don't have enough developers. They don't have enough skills. They can't hire developers fast enough. So at the end of the day, they're really just trying to bring tools to the developer to help them to be more productive, to be more effective, to be more efficient. And the developers are starting to embrace this as well, especially when they see that they can offload some of the things that they don't particularly care for doing, and they can spend more time on innovation and creativity. They get pretty excited about that.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. I think that the sentiment that I've heard a lot from people, and oftentimes they sort of want to tell you off the record, is they're excited about AI, they're excited about the possibilities of it, and at the same time, they want ways to experiment with it because they don't want to sort of get caught with a situation that it produces something that was unexpected, that was not something they had envisioned before, and so they're looking for ways to sort of experiment in private. They're looking for ways to do things on-prem that they can do it with their own data and kind of get a sense of confidence for it. So yeah, no, I think that sentiment makes sense. It's interesting, you sort of teed up my next question, which is about the not lack of developers, but just it never seems like there are enough developers for the because everything has become digitized, because every business project is a technology project. Do you expect that we'll see an evolution of the coding assistants? Obviously there are low code tools out there that are good for, I want to codify a specific process. But people don't necessarily think of those as like real developers, right? Like Java developers or folks. Do you think we'll start to see more citizen developer emerge out of this just because the coding assistants get so good at translating, kind of natural language ideas into code? Do you think that's going to, spur the number of people that'll be a higher level of developer because of this?
I do think that with the right culture, when you have a data and AI driven culture and you are open to accepting the help of AI assistance, whether that be in code or anything else, I do think that you will find knowledge workers being able to do more things than they could do in the past or different things than they've done in the past. And a lot of roles will evolve over time. I mean, I mentioned the Ansible automation platform earlier, and that's an area where, you've got IT operations folks that might not be day-to-day programmers, but they need to write code. And that's a really good example of, you can bring an AI assistant, you can talk to it in natural language, you can chat with your code, you can explain your code. And it really helps in terms of building skill, in educating individuals, knowledge workers, and helping them to be confident in actually becoming programmers or building software. So I do think it's a bit of a democratization of the work and who can do the work. That being said, we still need highly skilled programmers, highly skilled developers to do a lot of the work that's out there.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think the Ansible use case is very interesting because IT operations, we tend to lump it into one bucket. It could be everything from storage management to networking to security to operating systems, managing all those different things. And
Right.
today those groups tend to identify themselves as sort of siloed, right? They're a virtualization engineer, a network engineer. So, even a tool like allowing Ansible, which can automate all sorts of things, to speak the language that you feel natural speaking, and then sort of translates it for you into whatever that other domain is really, really powerful. And again, you may have technical background in networking, but your team got shrunk, or you're working on storage stuff and you're like, I just wish I knew how to configure that NetApp machine or that Linux machine, and I just don't know what that is. And that to me seems really, really powerful. I'm going to ask you one last question. I know you're busy. Obviously you've been traveling quite a bit. If you put on your kind of crystal ball hat and you were giving a talk at the IBM Tech Exchange a year from now, not so much what's your roadmap going to look like, but where you expect the things that people will be talking about. Where do you think we'll be, a year from now? What do you think people will be highlighting as success, or the steps to success? What might be looking forward to?
Yeah, I definitely think we are going to see a lot of success with coding assistants. I think next year at Tech Exchange, I will have numerous opportunities to bring clients on stage with me and talk about the success that they're having with our code assistant. I think we'll be talking a lot more about agentic workflows, about integrating code assistants into more and more of the developer tools and the developer pipeline. I think there's just a ton of opportunity out there, and we're really excited about it. I think the biggest thing that we'll see, Brian, is that organizations are truly going to be embracing this as a production level capability. Right now, there's a lot of experimentation going on. We have worked with early clients, including internally our client zero as IBM, and we're seeing a ton of success. So many companies are on the verge of really rolling this out with their developers, and I just think we're going to see them embracing it even more, and we're just going to continue to evolve, bringing in agentic capabilities, do more things automatically, and have a lot of happy developers because, again, they're focusing on the fun and exciting things like innovation and new creation.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. It is frustrating sometimes to see so many stats that talk about developer frustration or just the challenge they have with managing so many tools, and when you contrast to the companies that do building software well, that are able to translate business opportunities into technology. I'm excited to see what the new workflows look like, who gets creative about it, how well it's embraced. It feels like right now it's the space in AI that's the most tangible in terms of, the users are expecting it, they're excited about it, the technology's ready and there for it, and it's really just going to be kind of redefining that new workflow, that new process and so forth. So we're really, really excited about this. I'm going to give you kind of the last word. Anything you want to kind of throw out to people to get excited about or to try out, to experiment with, that you'd love them to get in front of?
Brian, the last thing I'll say is, as a developer, don't shy away from AI code assistants. AI code assistants are your friend. They're your assistant. They're there to help you. Treat it as a pair programmer. And please go out and check out What's Next Code Assistant. So we have our new product, What's Next Code Assistant, that will focus on the software development lifecycle across a number of programming languages. It's coming out in November. In that product, we are also focused on enterprise Java applications, and specifically helping with application modernization and Java upgrades. So lots of capabilities coming out. I would encourage you to take a look at IBM's Code Assistants on our website. We've got some great demonstrations out there as well. And I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in talking more about a Code Assistant and what it can do for your business.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Keri, thank you so much for the time today. Thanks for kind of enlightening us on where the market is and really, what's the sentiment out there with end users, with customers and so forth. So excited about that, folks. As we mentioned, we're recording this just before the end of October. So all these things will be available, imminently, if they're not available the first time you listen to the show. So we'll put some links in the show notes as well as that. So on behalf of Aaron and myself, we want to thank Keri for the time today, for educating us on what's going on in the developer assistant market, as well as just some of the work that's going on around AI sentiment in the market. So folks, with that, I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank you all for telling a friend, for giving us ratings and all the places that you listen to podcasts and helping us grow the community. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. We will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.